In the autumn of 1991, the quiet American neighborhood of Portland, Oregon, was shaken by the sudden disappearance of a young girl. She had vanished in her sleep, her mother returning to find the bed empty and the window wide open. But 9 years later, she discovers an old recording toy from her daughter, and when she presses play, she hears something she was never meant to hear, revealing a truth so disturbing it would lead investigators to the most shocking discovery of their careers that afternoon in Portland, Oregon. Elaine R.H. stood in what used to be her home, taping shut the last of the cardboard boxes. The house felt different now, emptier. Somehow, even though most of the furniture remained, it wasn't her house anymore. It belonged to Charles, her ex-husband, and that reality settled over her like a heavy blanket. Charles knelt beside her, securing another box with packing tape. His movements were careful, methodical, the way he did everything. They worked in comfortable silence, a rhythm they developed. Over 15 years of marriage, even divorce couldn't erase that familiarity. "This one's ready," Elaine said, pushing a box toward him. It contained her nursing uniforms, medical texts, and the stethoscope she received at graduation. Charles lifted the box easily, his carpenter's arm still strong at 45. "I'll take this one out," he said, heading for the front door. Elaine sealed another box, trying not to think about how this house had become a mausoleum of memories. They tried to keep their marriage together after Izzy vanished, but grief had different shapes for different people. Charles had retreated into his workshop. In therapy sessions, she'd thrown herself into extra shifts at the hospital, working until exhaustion silenced. The questions that haunted her, the arguments, had started small. Whose turn to buy groceries, why the electric bill was high. But they both knew what lay beneath: blame, guilt, the terrible weight of not knowing 6 months ago. They finally admitted what they'd both known for years: staying together wouldn't bring Izzy back. Charles returned, wiping sweat from his forehead. The June afternoon was warm, and loading boxes into Elaine's Honda Civic was hard work. "That's most of them," he said. "Just a few more. I want to visit her room," Elaine said quietly one last time. Charles's face softened. "Of course I'll finish loading these." He picked up another box, giving her privacy for her goodbye. Elaine climbed the familiar stairs, her hand trailing along the oak banister Charles had installed when they'd first moved in. Every creak of the floorboards held a memory. She paused at the door to Izzy's room, steeling herself before turning the knob. The room remained exactly as it had been that night. In 1991, pink walls with hand-painted butterflies, a white dresser covered in stickers, a small bed with its My Little Pony comforter only. The window was different now, fitted with new locks and security bars that came too late. Elaine remembered that October night with crystalline clarity. She worked a double shift at the hospital, arriving home at 3 o'clock in the morning. Exhausted, Charles was asleep. She checked on Izzy out of habit and found the bed empty, the window open, cool autumn air drifting through the curtains. The police had been thorough. At first, search dogs, helicopters. Hundreds of volunteers combing the woods behind their neighborhood. They found nothing, no fingerprints, no footprints, no sign of struggle. Just a 5-year-old girl who'd vanished into the night. The case had grown cold despite the initial media attention. The FBI had been involved briefly, but without evidence of interstate trafficking. They'd withdrawn. Local police kept the case open, but had no leads to follow. Elaine approached the wardrobe, where Izzy's photo sat in a silver frame. Her daughter smiled, back gap-toed and bright-eyed, wearing the striped shirt and denim overall she'd loved. Elaine kissed her fingers and pressed them to glass. "Goodbye, baby girl," she whispered, wiping her eyes. She left the room and headed downstairs. Charles was waiting by her car, the last boxes loaded. They stood facing each other in the driveway. Two people who'd once promised forever, now preparing for separate lives. "You'll be okay?" Charles asked. "I'll manage." Elaine said, "We both will." She got into her car and rolled down the window. Charles leaned in concern, creasing his face. "You sure you want to take all this stuff? Your apartment isn't that big." "If I need more space, I'll rent a storage unit." Elaine replied, "It's not a problem." She paused, softening. "Take care of yourself, Charles. We'll see each other around." "Yeah," he said, stepping back. "Drive safe." The 15-minute drive to her new apartment felt like crossing into another life. The building was a modest complex near the hospital, convenient for her night shifts. She'd rented a 2-bedroom on the second floor, one room for her, one for storage. Moving the boxes took hours. The building's wheel cart helped, but she still had to make multiple trips. Her new neighbors watched curiously, but didn't offer help. That was fine. She wasn't ready for new relationships. By evening, cardboard towers filled her living room. Elaine collapsed onto her second-hand couch, exhausted. She should unpack her essentials. Work clothes, toiletries, kitchen items. Instead, her eyes kept returning to the box marked Izzy's favorites. Unable to resist, she pulled it toward her and carefully opened the flaps. Charles had packed it. While she dealt with paperwork, she'd asked him to include things Izzy had loved most. Perched on top was a purple owl plush toy joined by Izzy's favorite unicorn and a collection of other dolls beneath them. Lay neatly folded dresses and pajamas, still carrying the faint scent of childhood Johnson's baby shampoo and graham crackers. Scattered below were well-loved books with bent corners, corduroy, with the wild things of the Velveteen Rabbit. Then Elaine saw the red and white cassette recorder, not the expensive Fisher-Price model Izzy had wanted for her 5th birthday, but a generic version from Toys Plus they'd been saving for a new water heater. That year the compromise had seemed reasonable. Then Elaine lifted the toy, surprised by its weight. The batteries were probably long dead. She found a battery compartment and discovered they leaked slightly, leaving crusty residue. After cleaning the contact with a tissue, she inserted fresh ace from her junk drawer. The play button clicked down with familiar mechanical sound. Static filled the air, then a small voice. Emerge testing. This is Isabella Marie Rodas, and I'm 5 years old. Elaine's heart clenched. She hadn't heard her daughter's voice in 9 years. Tears ran down her cheeks as Izzy continued chattering about her day, her friends at preschool, the butterflies she'd seen in the garden. Then the recording shifted background. Noises, movement, Charles's voice distant. But clear. Izzy, come to the princess room. When you're done, remember what I promised once we're finished. We'll go to Toys R Us for that new My Little Pony. Elaine frowned. Princess room. She rewound and played it again. Charles's tone was different than usual, cajoling, almost wheedling. And Izzy hadn't been particularly interested in princesses. She preferred animals, dragons, unicorns, puppies. Maybe Charles had been trying to redirect her interest. Parents did that, sometimes encouraging children toward different toys. The promise My Little Pony made sense as a bribe for good behavior. Elaine searched through the box, but found no pony figurines. Perhaps they were in another box, or Charles had kept them. Some toys had been too painful to pack. She replayed the recording, listening intently to each word. Princess room, a strange phrase. Charles had never referred to Izzy's bedroom that way. Was it part of a game? They played a special nickname that had slipped her memory. After all, Charles had spent more of the daytime hours with Izzy. She set the recorder aside and began unpacking her personal belongings. Hours passed as she arranged her life into new spaces, dishes in unfamiliar cabinets, clothes in a smaller closet, photos on different walls. When she opened her filing cabinet to organize important papers, she realized something was missing. Her nursing license renewal documents weren't there. She checked every folder twice, then searched the boxes labeled with her name. Nothing. The clock showed 8:30 p.m. Her shift started at 10 o'clock. Without those documents, she couldn't prove her credentials were current. The hospital administration was strict about paperwork. She dialed Charles's number from her new phone. He answered on the third ring. Elaine, everything okay? I can't find my nursing license documents. She said, I think I left them at the house. Would it be all right if I came by to look? Oh, pause. I just left for my grief group therapy session. Won't be back until late. Elaine glanced outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. I really need them for my shift tonight. Could I use my key? Of course, Charles said. You know where everything is. Just lock up when you leave. Thanks, I appreciate it. No problem. Good luck tonight. Elaine hung up and grabbed her keys, a familiar way of the house key. Felt strange, now a remnant of her old life. She should probably return soon. She left the unpacked boxes scattered across her living room and headed for her car. Elaine pulled into familiar driveway. 15 minutes later, the house stood dark against the evening sky, windows reflecting the last rays of sunset. Strange how quickly a home could become just a building. She let herself in through the front door, flipping on lights. As she moved through the house, everything remained exactly where she left it hours ago, but the emptiness felt more pronounced now. The bedroom, Charles's bedroom now, she reminded herself, was at the end of the hall. She pushed open the door and switched on the overhead light. The queen bed they'd shared for 15 years looked strange, with only one pillow. Charles had already removed traces of her presence. No jewelry dish on the dresser, no romance novels on the nightstand. The filing cabinet stood in the corner where it had always been. She opened the second drawer and found a manila folder marked medical licenses. Exactly where she kept the documents were all there. Her original license, renewal forms, continuing education certificates. Relief washed over her. At least this wouldn't affect her work. She tucked the folder under her arm and did a quick scan of the room. Nothing else seemed forgotten as she turned to leave the cassette. Recorder's words echoed in her mind. Princess room, the phrase Nagged at her a puzzle piece that didn't fit, she found herself climbing the stairs to Izzy's room again. The door creaked as she entered. Without the cluttered toys and clothes she'd packed earlier, the room looked larger, sadder. She walked slowly around the perimeter, running her fingers along the walls, half expecting to find some princess decoration. She'd forgotten nothing, no castles, tiaras, or fairy tale imagery. She opened a closet door, empty hangers clinked together in the slight breeze. From her movement, the wardrobe stood against the far wall. When she approached it, the old piece shifted slightly, tilting toward her. Without the weight of clothes inside, its structural problems were obvious. The left front foot didn't touch the floor properly. She examined the gap, noticing how the wooden floorboards had warped underneath the room, had been closed up so often since Izzy's disappearance. Moisture had probably accumulated. Portland's damp climate was hard on old houses. The wardrobe wobbled when she tried to steady it. One good shove might topple it completely. She couldn't leave it like this. If it fell in the night, Charles might think someone had broken. The last thing he needed was that kind of scare. She checked her watch. 7:30 p.m. Harrison's hardware stayed open until 8. She could grab some wooden shims to level it out, do a quick fix before her shift. The phone rang downstairs sharp in the quiet house. Elaine hurried down, instinctively moving to answer it. Her hand was on the receiver when she stopped. This wasn't her house anymore. Charles deserved privacy. Whatever calls came here were no longer her business. She gathered her folder and purse, switching off lights. As she moved toward the door, the phone stopped ringing. After a pause, the answering machine clicked on. Charles's recorded voice said, "You've reached the Rhodes residence. Please leave a message." A woman's voice filled the room, warm but concerned. "Charles, this is Mrs. Jansen from Group. I need you to call me back as soon as possible. We need to discuss your attendance and participation. You've missed 3 sessions now. That's 3 weeks. Charles, the group is concerned. Please call me." Elaine froze. 3 weeks. But Charles had just told her he was at therapy every Tuesday evening for the past 5 years. He'd attended his grief counseling group. It was one of the few constants in their lives after Izzy misses. Jansen had been their rock during the worst times, a trained therapist who specialized in parental loss. She'd started the group specifically for parents of missing children. Elaine had attended for 2 years before the sessions became too painful. Why would Charles lie about attending? Where had he been going every Tuesday? She wanted to call Mrs. Jansen back, but that would be overstepping. Whatever was happening with Charles wasn't her responsibility anymore. Still concerned, nodded her. They promised to remain friends and support each other. Even after the divorce, Elaine locked the front door and walked to her car. The Honda had come with an expensive car phone installed by the previous owner, a luxury she kept for emergencies. She picked up the bulky handset and dialed Charles's number. The evening air had cooled, bringing the scent of pine, and distant rain streetlights flickered on along the quiet suburban street. This neighborhood had been their dream when they'd bought the house 10 years ago. Safe, family-friendly, good schools. Now it was just another place where Izzy wasn't. The phone rang in her ear once, twice, 3 times. She almost hung up then. Charles answered. "Hello?" His voice sounded strained, breathless. "Charles, it's me." Elaine said, "I just want to check in. Where are you? Are you at therapy?" Silence stretched between them, broken only by static on the car phone line. "Charles." She said, "Can you hear me?" "Yes," Charles stuttered. "I mean, no, but I'm on the way there." His words tumbled out quickly. "I went to pick up Matthew. You know, he lives quite far from here, but we plan to attend the session together. I'll be 15 minutes late." Why do you ask? Something in his voice didn't sound right. Elaine had heard Charles lie before. White lies about surprise parties, small fibs. To spare someone's feelings, this had the same quality. Words coming too fast, explanations too detailed. "I didn't mean to probe," Elaine said carefully. "When I was at your house getting my documents, a call came and it went to voicemail. Mrs. Jansen." Yes, Charles laughed, but it sounded forced. "I know she doesn't like it when anyone's late to group therapy meetings. I've been late to several meetings, so maybe she wanted to talk to me about that." Late was different from absent. 3 weeks of missed sessions wasn't the same as arriving 15 minutes after start time. "What did she say in the voicemail?" Charles asked, his tone too casual. Elaine hesitated. Part of her wanted to confront him directly, but what was the point? They were divorced. His choices were his own now, nothing specific. She said, "Just wanted you to call back. It's not a big deal." Right while she could go in. Matthews waiting. "Sure, drive safe, you two." By Elaine, the line when dead. Elaine stared at the phone for a moment before hanging up. In 15 years of marriage, she learned to read Charles's moods as tells. He was definitely lying about something. She started the car and pulled away from the house. Harrison's hardware was only 5 minutes away, a family-owned store that had survived the arrival of big box retailers through excellent service and community loyalty. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. George Harrison, The owner's son looked up from behind the counter and smiled at Elaine. Good to see you. How's everything fine, George? Just need some shims for a wobbly wardrobe aisle 3 halfway down. He rang up another customer, then called out, Hey, how's Charles's renovation project? Going, does he need a hand? I've got some free time this weekend. Elaine paused, confused. Renovation? Yeah, the hobby room he's building. He was in here last weekend, bought a whole cart full of supplies. I think you must be mistaken, Elaine said slowly. We don't have any renovation going on. George frowned, scratching his head. I'm pretty sure it was Charles. He bought plywood sheets, paint, some new tools. Said he was finally making that hobby room. He'd always talk about a hobby room Charles had mentioned wanting 1 year ago back when he still did carpentry. Projects were fun, but after Izzy disappeared, he'd lost interest in his hobbies. Well, Elaine said, forcing a smile, I'll ask him about it. Thanks for the information. No problem, the shims are right where I said. Elaine found what she needed, quickly paid for her purchase, and headed back to her car. The hardware store bag crinkled as she sat on the passenger seat. A renovation project. She knew nothing about missed therapy sessions, lies about where he was tonight. The pieces didn't fit together, but Elaine couldn't see the whole picture. Yet maybe Charles was just going through a difficult time with the divorce. People handle grief, and change differently. He might have thrown himself into a project to cope. Been too embarrassed to admit he'd stopped therapy. She checked the dashboard clock at 8:05 p.m. If she hurried, she could fix the wardrobe and still make it to her shift on time. The evening had taken on surreal quality. This morning, she'd been married, living in this neighborhood. Now she was a visitor in her own life, discovering secrets in a house that had once held no mysteries. She turned the key in the ignition and drove back toward Charles's house, unaware that each mile brought her closer to. Answer she wasn't prepared to find. Elaine pulled into Charles's driveway for the second time. That evening, the hardware store bag rustled. As she gathered it along with her purse, she'd make this quick, fix the wardrobe leave for her shift. George's words about the renovation played in her mind. Maybe Charles really was returning to his old hobbies during their courtship. He'd spent weekends crafting beautiful wooden figurines, owls, foxes, little bears, with intricate details his hands had been so. Gentle and precise, coaxing life from raw with her key, turned easily in the lock. The house sat in darkness. Except for the porch light she'd left on, she flipped the switch in the entryway and headed for the stairs. Halfway up, she noticed light spilling from under Charles's office door. Strange, she'd turned off all the lights earlier. Charles. She called, Are you home? No answer, but she heard movement, footsteps, the scrape of furniture. She reached the second floor, landing. The footsteps grew louder, more frantic. Papers rustled, the drawer slammed. Charles. She called again. Is everything okay? Still no response. Unease prickled along her spine. She approached the office door and pushed it open. Charles the first. Thought you were. The words died in her throat. Matthew Tenko stood in the middle of the ransacked office. Charles's files lay scattered across the floor. Desk drawers hung open, contents spilled everywhere. Books had been pulled from shelves, papers torn from binders. Matthew. Elaine stared at him in shock. Why are you here? I thought you were with Matthew. Turned slowly. His face glistened with sweat, skin pale and waxy. His normally neat hair stuck up at odd angles. When his eyes met hers, she saw his pupils were dilated, black pools. Are you okay? Elaine asked, though clearly he wasn't. You look ill. Matthew took a step toward her. The movement was unsteady, and she caught the sharp smell of alcohol, mixed with something else, sweat and desperation. What are you doing here? Elaine kept her voice calm despite her growing alarm. Did Charles ask you to find something? Matthew's expression remained blank, cold. He took another step forward. Elaine had known him for years. He and Charles had been friends since high school, bonding over their shared love of woodworking. She'd never seen him like this. Matthew, stay there. She said firmly, I'll call a medic. You need help. She reached for the office phone, but Matthew lunged forward with surprising speed. His hands clamped around her wrist, grip painfully tight. Let go. Elaine tried to pull free, but his fingers dug deeper. Matthew, you're hurting me. She shoved hard, breaking his hold, stumbling backward out of the office. She grabbed the door handle, trying to pull it closed between them. Matthew caught the edge and wrenched it open. Fear flooded through her. This wasn't a Matthew. She knew the quiet man who brought homemade toys for Izzy, who helped Charles build their deck one summer. Something was terribly wrong. Elaine turned to run for the stairs, but Matthew caught her from behind, arms wrapping around her waist. She struggled as he half carried, half dragged her down the hall. No. She fought against his grip, but he was stronger. He pushed through Izzy's bedroom door and threw her onto the small bed. The My Little Pony comforter cushioned her fall, but before she could scramble away, Matthew was on top of her, pinning her down. His breath reeked of whiskey. As his hands reached for her, Matthew, please. Elaine begged, trying to push him off. Don't do this, you have. A wife and child at home, think about them. He didn't respond, didn't seem to hear her. His face remained eerily expressionless. As he grabbed at her clothes, Elaine's hand found Izzy's ceramic nightlight on the bedside table, a pink elephant she bought years ago. She swung hard, connecting with Matthew's temple. I'm sorry. I have to do this, he grunted, and rolled sideways, hand going his head. Elaine scrambled off the bed and ran for the door, but Matthew recovered quickly. He grabbed her arm and spun her around, slamming her back against the wardrobe. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. She fell to her knees as the wardrobe teetered its already unstable base, giving way. The heavy piece toppled forward with a tremendous crash, which splintered the floor beneath, cracked, and gave way, revealing a hidden cavity. As dust settled, Elaine saw cardboard boxes, and a whole dozen of them filled with VHS cassettes and VCDs. Matthew's entire demeanor changed. His face lit up with a disturbing grin. This is what I was looking for. He dropped to his knees and began grabbing tapes, shoving them into his arms. Elaine, still dazed from the impact, watched in confusion. What were these? Why were they hidden under the floor? Stop. She lunged for Matthew, trying to prevent him from taking whatever these were. Her hands knocked several cassettes from his grip, and they clattered across the floor. Matthew cursed and gathered what he could carry, clutching the tapes to his chest. He pushed past Elaine and ran from a room, footsteps thundering down the stairs. I'm calling the police. Elaine shouted after him, her voice shaky but determined. She heard the front door slam through the window. She watched Matthew stumble down the driveway, still clutching his stolen prizes. He didn't look back, didn't seem to care about her threat. Whatever was on those tapes was worth the risk to him. Elaine slumped against the wall, heart racing. Her wrist throbbed where Matthew had grabbed her back, act from hitting the wardrobe, but mostly she felt confusion and growing dread. What had just happened? Why had Matthew broken into Charles's house? What was on those tapes that made them worth assaulting her? She looked at the broken floor, at the boxes of tape still visible in the hidden compartment. Whatever secrets they held, Matthew had only taken a fraction. The rest remained, waiting to reveal their contents. With trembling hands, she reached for the nearest cassette. The label read simply, Princess Room, Volume 47 inches. The same phrase from Izzy's tape recorder, but now it carried a weight of menace she couldn't quite understand. Elaine struggled to her feet. She needed to call the police now. Elaine's hand shook as she dialed 911. The phone felt impossibly heavy. When the dispatcher answered, her voice came out in a rush. I need police at 4728 Elm Street. A man just attacked me. He broke into the house, and he took things. His name is Matthew Tenko. The dispatcher asked calm questions. Elaine answered mechanically, her eyes fixed on a hole in Izzy's bedroom floor. Police are on their way. The dispatcher assured her stay on the line until they arrived. While waiting, Elaine couldn't resist examining the cassettes Matthew had dropped in his haste. She picked them up, carefully reading each label. Princess Room Volume 23, in Princess Room Volume 89, in Princess Room Volume 256. In her stomach churned. How many were there? She peered into the hidden compartment and saw rows of boxes, each containing dozens of tapes and discs, hundreds in total, all labeled with the same cryptic title. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder through the window. She saw two patrol cars, pull-up lights flashing red and blue against the darkening sky. A uniformed officer appeared in the doorway, hand resting on his weapon. Are you Elaine Rodas? Yes. She stood on unsteady legs. A man who attacked me left about 10 minutes ago. He was drunk or on drugs. He took some of these. She gestured to the tapes. More officers entered, securing the house to lead. Officer detective by his plain clothes introduced himself as Detective Morrison. He was older, mid-50s, with kind eyes that had seen too much. Elaine told him everything, finding Matthew in the office, the assault, the wardrobe falling, and revealing the hidden tapes. Morrison listened carefully, taking notes. You said his name is Matthew Tenko? Morrison asked. Yes, he's my ex-husband's best friend. They've known each other since high school. She paused. I should call Charles. He needs to know what happened. Morrison, not a good idea. We'll want to speak with him too. Elaine dialed Charles's number, the detective standing nearby. The phone rang several times before Charles answered. Elaine, his voice was sharp with irritation. Why do you keep calling me Charles? Where are you? I told you I'm with Matthew at therapy. What is this about? Elaine felt her heart sink. Another lie, Charles. Matthew was just here at your house. He attacked me. The police are here now. Silence on the other end. They want to talk to you. Elaine continued. She held out the phone to Morrison. He wants to speak with you. Morrison took the phone. Mr. Rhodes, this is Detective Morrison. We need you to come to your residence immediately. There's been an incident involving a line. When dead, Morrison frowned and handed the phone back. He hung up. He said he was at his therapy group. Elaine said with Mrs. Jansen. But that can't be true. If Matthew was here, Morrison turned to one of his officers. Get the therapy center's address and this Mrs. Jansen's contact. Information sent a unit to check it out. While officers made calls, Morrison examined the tapes. His expression grew more serious. As he read the labels, these all say Princess Room. What does that mean? I don't know, Elaine admitted. I heard it on an old recording of my daughter today. She went missing 9 years ago. These tapes were hidden under the floor. Morrison's eyes sharpened. Your daughter is missing. What was her name? Isabella. Izzy. She was 5 when she disappeared from her bed. Elaine's voice cracked. The police never found any leads. A detective exchanged glances with his officers. Ma'am, I think we should look at what's on these tapes. They moved to the living room. Elaine's hands trembled as she turned on the TV and inserted a disc into Charles's player. The screen flickered to life. At first, it seemed innocent Charles and 5-year-old Izzy in their living room playing with blocks. Izzy's laughter filled the room. That same bright sound from the cassette recorder, that's from before she disappeared. Elaine whispered, maybe a few months. On screen, Charles smiled at the camera. Izzy, want to play a game? Go to the Princess Room and surprise me. Okay, Daddy. Izzy jumped up and ran off camera. Her footsteps could be heard going downstairs. Charles looked directly at the camera and began counting 1, 2, 3. He drew out each number, taking several seconds between them. She's going to the basement, Elaine said, confused. But we never called it the Princess Room. Charles reached 10 and stood the camera followed him as he walked to the basement door, and to send the video cut abruptly. When it resumed, they were in a different room, pink walls, stuffed animals, a child-sized bed with princess sheets. Elaine had never seen this room before. Izzy sat on the bed, wearing a tiny bikini swimsuit, far too adult for a 5-year-old. She looked uncomfortable, uncertain. Now pose for Daddy. Charles's voice came from behind the camera. What followed made Ella's blood run cold. Charles entered the frame and sat beside Izzy. His hands moved to touch her in ways no father should touch his child. Izzy's face showed confusion, discomfort. Stop. Elaine cried out, turn it off. Morrison paused the video. Immediately, Elaine collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Her whole world had shattered in seconds. A man she'd loved, trusted, shared a life, but he was a monster. I never knew, she gasped between sobs. I never saw that room. Oh, God, my baby. Morrison sat beside her, his voice gentle but urgent. Mrs. Rodas, I need to think. Could your daughter still be in this house in the basement? Elaine's head snapped up. The possibility hadn't occurred to her. The basement, it's always locked. Charles has the only key. He said it was for safety, to keep his tools secure. An officer approached. Detective, I spoke with Mrs. Jansen. Charles Rodas hasn't attended therapy in 3 weeks. He's not there tonight. Morrison stood. That's probably because we're going into that basement. He turned to his officers. Get the breaching tools in the car. We're going through that door. Yes, Elaine said, firmly wiping her tears. Do it. If there's any chance she couldn't finish the sentence. 9 years could I have been in the basement for 9 years. Officers returned with heavy tools, a battering ram, and crowbars. They moved toward the basement door, a solid oak barrier that had always seemed excessive for an interior door. Stand back, ma'am. Morrison instructed. Elaine pressed against the far wall, heart pounding. After all these years of not knowing, of grieving, of slowly accepting that Izzy was gone forever, could the answer have been beneath her feet? All along, the first blow from the battering ram shook the entire wall. The door held firm. Charles had reinforced it. She realized, made it stronger than necessary. Another piece of the horrible puzzle falling into place again. Morrison ordered the second impact. Cracked the frame. The third sent splinters flying. On the fourth blow, the door gave way with a tremendous crash. The basement door gave way with a final crash, revealing wooden stairs descending into darkness. An officer found the light switch and flipped it on. Fluorescent bulbs hummed to life, illuminating a surprisingly organized space. Morrison led the way down, weapon drawn, followed by 3 officers. Elaine waited at the top of the stairs until Morrison called, clear, you can come down. The basement looked exactly as Elaine remembered. Charles's workbench stood against one wall, tools hanging in neat rows. Shelves held labeled boxes of screws, nails, and hardware. A washer and dryer occupied one corner, everything in perfect order. My husband is very organized, Elaine said, her voice echoing slightly. He works down here, sometimes building things. It's not entirely abandoned. Morrison nodded, but his expression remained skeptical. Check everything. There's got to be a hidden entrance somewhere. Officers spread out, examining every wall, every corner. They knocked on surfaces, listening for hollow sounds. They checked for fresh paint that might hide new construction, different materials that didn't match, unusual marks on the concrete floor upstairs. Elaine could hear other officers going through the videos, searching for clues about the hidden room's location. Occasionally, someone would curse or make a sound of disgust. She didn't want to know what they were seeing. The hardware store clerk mentioned renovation supplies. Elaine told Morrison, said Charles bought materials for some project. Do you have the house's original blueprints? Morrison asked building plans. I haven't seen them in years. Charles would know where they are. But she trailed off. Charles wasn't going to help him to search. Continue methodically. Officers pushed aside. Storage boxes move furniture. Check behind the water heater. 20 minutes passed with no success. Elaine found herself on her hands and knees peering under the workbench. If Charles had hidden something, he'd done it. While she moved to check under the washing machine, angling her head to see into the narrow gap, something caught the light, a thin edge that gleamed differently than the concrete floor. Detective. She called, "There's something under here." Morrison and two officers hurried over together. They gripped the washing machine and pulled it away from the wall. The dryer followed, scraping loudly across the floor. A disc lay where the washer had been covered in dust. Morrison picked it up carefully. The label reads Room Volume 331, and looked at the wall. One officer said where machines had hidden at the wall showed a subtle irregularity. A section of drywall didn't quite match the seam, cleverly disguised but visible now. They knew where to look. Morrison ran his fingers along the edge, found a hidden latch. The false panel had been masterfully crafted, nearly invisible. When closed, "Stand back." He ordered. The latch was locked. Morrison tried to force it, but it held firm. An officer handed him a crowbar. Metal scraped against metal. Then the lock gave way with a snap. The panel swung open behind it. A narrow passage stretched into darkness. Pink fairy lights ran along the ceiling, unplugged, but clearly meant to illuminate the way. The smell hit them immediately. Mildew, metal, and something else. Human habitation. In a confined space, Morrison found where the lights plugged in and connected them. Pink glow filled the passage, revealing walls covered in soundproofing material. The corridor was barely wide enough for one person. Jesus Christ. An officer muttered. They moved through single file. Morrison leading the passage, extended about 20 feet before ending at another door. This one was painted pink with princess stickers decorating it. Morrison tried the handle locked. He knocked firmly. Police opened the door. Silence. He pressed his ear against it, which shook his head. The soundproofing made it impossible to hear inside. He raised his fist to knock again when the lock clicked. The door opened a few inches, and a young voice called out cheerfully, "Daddy, you're early." The door swung wider, revealing a teenage girl. She wore a pink nightgown, her blonde hair long. Entangled, her smile froze when she saw Morrison, and the officers behind him. A scream tore from her throat. High and terrified, she stumbled back with hands over her face. No, you're not real, Daddy," said. "Everyone's dead." Elaine pushed past the officers. Even after 9 years, even with the changes from child to teenager, she knew her daughter instantly. Izzy. She rushed forward, tears streaming. "Darling, it's Mommy. It's me." The girl pressed against the far wall, shaking her head violently. "No, my mom died." "Everyone died, Dad," said. "The world ended." And it's just as Elaine dropped to her knees, holding out her arms. "No, sweetheart, that's not true. I've been searching for you all this time. I never knew you were here, Daddy," Izzy screamed. "Daddy, help. Where are you, please?" Elaine begged. "Look at me, really look at me." Morrison quietly motioned his officers to stay back, giving mother and daughter space. He pulled out a pen and handed it to Elaine. Understanding immediately, Elaine took the pen and began drawing on her own hand a simple butterfly with a smiley face, the same design she'd drawn countless times when Izzy was small. "Remember this?" she said softly. "You used to ask me to draw it every time the old one washed off. You called it your happy butterfly." Izzy's eyes fixed on the drawing. Her breathing slowed. Recognition dawned slowly, like sun breaking through clouds. "Mommy." The word came out broken, uncertain. "But Daddy said—" "I know what he said, darling, but he lied. I'm here. I'm real." Elaine opened her arms again. This time, Izzy flew into them. They held each other, both sobbing. Elaine breathed in her daughter's. Scent felt her solid warmth. Alive. After all these years, alive. Morrison and his team entered the room. Carefully, the space was small, maybe 10 by 12-foot. Pink walls, princess decorations. Everywhere, a single mattress on the floor with Disney sheets, toys scattered about, some age appropriate for a teenager, others clearly from when she was younger. A small TV sat in one corner with VCR and disc players. A tripod stood nearby. Camera mount empty. Professional lighting equipment, coloring books, and crayons. A narrow drawer built into the wall. Probably how food was delivered in the closet. Officers found things that made them exchange dark looks. Adult toys, lingerie, and child sizes video equipment, tools whose purpose was all too clear. "We need medical," Morrison said quietly into his radio, "and confirm all units are searching for Charles Rodas, and Matthew Tenko Rhodes is now primary suspect in child abduction and abuse." Paramedics arrived within minutes. They approached Izzy, gently explaining they needed to check her health. She clung to Elaine, but allowed the examination outside in the ambulance away from the pink prison. Izzy sat between Elaine and a female paramedic. She seemed dazed, overwhelmed by the sudden expansion of her world. "I thought everyone was dead," she kept repeating. "Dad said there was a war in nuclear bombs. He said we were the only ones left." She looked at Elaine with eyes too old for her 14 years. "He said I needed to have a baby to save the human race, but I never got pregnant. I felt so bad, like I was failing." Elaine's stomach turned. She forced her voice to stay calm. "Sweetheart, have you gotten your period yet? Yes, 2 years ago, Dad was so happy. He said, now we could really start our new world." The paramedic made notes her face, carefully neutral. "Izzy, do you have any pain, any itching, or discomfort?" "Anywhere, no." Izzy seemed puzzled by the question. "Why is everyone so scared?" Dad lied. "I know. But he always loved me. He said what we did was beautiful, that I was meant for him." Elaine bit back a sob. 9 years of grooming, manipulation, abuse disguised as love. Her baby girl had no concept of how wrong at all was. She took Izzy's hands gently. "Sweetheart, what your father did wasn't right. Adults shouldn't do those things with children. That kind of intimacy is only for grown-ups who choose each other like husbands and wives." "But I love Daddy," Izzy protested, confusion clear in her voice. "I know you do, but there are different kinds of love. The love between a parent and child is supposed to be protective, safe. What he did, that wasn't love, baby. It was wrong." Izzy fell silent, processing this new information. The paramedic finished her initial examination. "She appears stable," she told Elaine quietly, "but she'll need a full examination at the hospital given the circumstances." Elaine nodded. She understood they needed to check for a pregnancy, diseases, physical damage, the full horror of what her daughter had endured. Morrison approached the ambulance. "We need to take you both to the station for statements." The medical team said it's not an emergency, so we can do that first if you're willing. Elaine looked at Izzy, who seemed lost in thought. "Yes, let's get this done." As they prepared to leave, Elaine realized the twisted logic of Charles's plan, the arguments, the push for divorce. He'd wanted freedom to live his sick fantasy without interference. He'd kept their daughter prisoner, while Elaine slept upstairs, worked her shifts, lived her life, believing Izzy was gone. The pink fairy light still glowed in the basement as they left, marking the path to a nightmare that had lasted 3,285 days, 9 years of a child's life stolen, twisted, corrupted. As they stepped outside, Morrison opened the back door of the patrol car. "Mrs. Rhodes, Isabella, please get in. We need to take you to the station." Elaine helped Izzy into the back seat, following close behind. The girl pressed against her mother, still bewildered by the sudden change in her world. The medical team had cleared them for transport, though Izzy would need comprehensive examinations later. Officer Chin sat in the driver's seat, adjusting his radio. Static crackled before voices came through clearly. "Unit 12, we've apprehended Charles Rhodes and Matthew Tenko at 3542 Riverside Drive. 6 additional suspects in custody, requesting transport." Van Morrison leaned forward. "That's them, Chin. What's the location?" "Riverside Drive is on our route to the station, sir. About 5 minutes from here. Make a quick stop. I want to see the scene." As they drove through the quiet Portland streets, Elaine held Izzy close. The girl hadn't spoken much since leaving the basement, occasionally asking where her father was when he'd come back. Each question broke Elaine's heart. "A little more." The radio continued its chatter. "Be advised, evidence of child exploitation material found on scene. CSU requested." Elaine covered Izzy's ears, though the girl seemed lost in her own thoughts. The reality of what Charles had done, what he'd put their daughter through, made her physically ill. They turned onto Riverside Drive, a tree-lined residential street with modest 2-story homes. Police cars blocked the road lights. Flashing, a crowd of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, craning to see what was happening. "Stay in the car," Morrison instructed as they parked. "I'll just be a moment." Through the window, Elaine could see everything. 8 men stood handcuffed near a police van. Charles was among them, his head down, shoulders slumped. Matthew stood beside him, swaying slightly, clearly still intoxicated. The other 6 men ranged in age from 30s to 60s. Some looked defiant, others terrified. All wore the comfortable clothes of a casual evening gathering. Officers moved in and out of the house, carrying evidence bags. Elaine heard fragments of conversation through the cracked window. "Found them watching with the videos when we entered Princess Room, volume 962. Looks recent. Say they're part of something called Family Sanctum Fellowship. Meetings rotate between houses, sharing their material." Bow rose in Elaine's throat. "A club?" They'd formed a club to share videos of their own children. How many other victims were there? Charles suddenly looked up, his eyes meeting Elaine's through the car window. For a moment, neither moved, then his lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "Wait here," Elaine told Izzy, her voice shaking with rage. She pushed open the car door and strode toward her ex-husband. Officers moved to intercept, but she was too quick. Her hand connected with Charles's cheek in a sharp slap that echoed off the nearby houses. "You're a monster," she screamed. "You're not a human being." Charles barely flinched. His voice was calm, almost conversational. It was a consensual relationship. Izzy always loved me. She wanted shut up. An officer grabbed Charles's arm. Not another word, another officer gently, but firmly pulled Elaine back. Ma'am, please, this won't help. Through her tears of rage, Elaine saw Matthew watching her. He pursed his lips in an obscene kissing gesture, then slowly ran his tongue over them. The same man who'd attacked her hours ago, who'd wanted those videos so desperately. Get her back to the car, Morrison ordered. These men aren't worth it. The officer guided Elaine back to the patrol car, where Izzy waited, face pressed against the window. Where did you go, Mommy? Why did you hit Daddy? Elaine slid back into the seat, pulling her daughter close. I'm sorry, darling. I shouldn't have done that outside. Officers loaded the 8 men into separate vehicles. The transport van pulled away first, followed by 2 patrol cars. Charles never looked back. Crime scene technicians continued their work through a window. Elaine watched them carry out box after box of evidence, VHS tapes, VCDs, DVDs, each one representing someone's child, someone's nightmare. They even removed the television and video players, anything that might contain evidence. Yellow crime scene tape went up around property. Neighbors whispered among themselves, no doubt sharing theories about what had happened in the ordinary-looking house on their quiet street. Morrison returned to the car, his face grim. We'll go to the station now. There's a lot to process. But you both did well tonight. As they pulled away from the scene, Elaine took one last look at the house where evil had hidden in plain sight. How many such houses existed? How many children were trapped behind ordinary doors? Izzy yawned, exhausted by the night's events. When can I go home? Elaine stroked her daughter's hair, now long and tangled. After years without proper care, soon, sweetheart. We'll get you home a safe one. The police station lights appeared ahead, a beacon in the darkness. Somewhere behind them, Charles and his associates were being processed, their crimes finally exposed. Before Elaine and Izzy, the real journey was just beginning. The long road to healing from wounds that ran deeper than anyone could imagine. Morrison spoke quietly to Chun as they drove. Make sure family services has someone ready. This is going to be a long night. The police station bustled with activity. As they entered through a window into the booking area, Elaine caught glimpses of the 8 men being processed. Fingerprints, photographs, personal belongings, cataloged. Charles stood with his back straight, expression blank, as if this were just another ordinary evening. A woman in a gray suit approached them. I'm Sarah Martinez from Child Protective Services. I'll be staying with Isabella while you give your statement. Izzy gripped Elaine's hand tighter. I want to stay with my mom. I know, sweetheart, Sarah said gently, but we need to talk to you both separately just for a little while. Your mom will be right down the hall. Elaine knelt and hugged her daughter. It's okay. These people want to help us. I'll see you soon. Morrison led Elaine to a small interview room. The walls were beige, the furniture basic, but clean. A video camera in the corner recorded everything. Take your time, Morrison said, settling across from her. Tell me everything from beginning. Elaine spoke for nearly an hour. Their marriage, Izzy's birth, the night she disappeared, the years of searching grief, the slow dissolution of their relationship, the divorce, finding the tape, recorded the evening's revelations. Morrison took notes, asking clarifying questions, but mostly letting her talk. When she finished, Elaine felt drained. What happens now? What did Charles do to our daughter? Morrison's face was sympathetic. I need to warn you, what you're about to hear is disturbing, but you have a right to know. He stood. Follow me. They walked down a corridor to another room with a large window overlooking an interrogation room. Charles sat at a metal table, handcuffed. In front of him, 2 detectives sat across from him. The glass is one way, Morrison explained. He can't see us. He's been talking for the past 20 minutes through speakers. Charles's voice filled the observation room. He spoke calmly, almost proudly, as if describing a successful business venture. I took her that night, Charles said. October 15th, 1991. Elaine was working her night shift. I carried Izzy downstairs to the princess room I had finished building. She was sleeping, didn't even wake up. One detective leaned forward, and the window I opened it made it look like an abduction. Everyone bought it. He actually smiled. 9 years she lived down there. I told her the world had ended. Nuclear war. We were the last 2 people alive. She believed every word. Elaine's knees went weak. Morrison guided her to a chair while the detective asked, why did you do this? Charles shrugged. She was mine, my creation. Why shouldn't I keep her? I gave her everything she needed, food, toys, attention. And when she was old enough, he paused, we were rebuilding humanity. That's what I told her. She needed to have my baby to save the species. How did we miss a room? The other detective asked. You did a standard walkthrough, Charles said dismissively, not a deep search. I cluttered the basement with tools and equipment you took. One look and moved on the false wall. I'd built 2 years earlier during a renovation. I even filed fake permits, showed you false blueprints. The room was soundproof, no ventilation to the main house, completely undetectable, Elaine whispered to Morrison. He was always gifted with carpentry. So precise, so organized, I worked nights, never suspected her voice broke. If Matthew hadn't been so reckless tonight, we might never have found her. Morrison nodded grimly. Let's go back, you heard. Enough in the interview room. Elaine sat heavily. What? About Matthew, why did he break in? Matthew Tenko has been very honest, Morrison said when we raided the house. He was ranting about Charles. Apparently, there's been rivalry between them for years. He consulted his notes. In their sick group, Charles was the star. He made the most videos, had the most compliant victim. The others would take turns sharing their material. But Charles's videos were always requested as a bonus. He was proud of that. Status. Elaine felt sick, her daughter reduced to entertainment. For monsters, Matthew became obsessed. Morrison continued. He developed desires for Izzy, but couldn't find where Charles kept her. So he decided to steal the video collection. He broke into the back door tonight, didn't expect to be there. He attacked me, Elaine said. Quietly, try do we know. He confessed to that too, said you reminded him of Izzy. Morrison's voice was gentle. Mrs. Rodas, your daughter, is going to need extensive therapy. She may seem okay on the surface, but 9 years of psychological manipulation and abuse, there will be deep trauma. I know, Elaine said, but she's alive. We have a chance. Morrison stood. Let's reunite you with your daughter. They found Izzy in the corridor with Sarah Martinez. The girl jumped up when she saw Elaine. Mommy. They embraced, both crying. Elaine breathed in her daughter's. Since still amazed, she was real alive here. An officer will escort you to the hospital soon, Sarah said, for the examination we discussed. They moved to a quiet waiting room. Izzy curled against Elaine on a worn couch. For a while, neither spoke. The weight of everything that had happened, everything that would need to happen, pressed down on them. Then Izzy began to cry, not the confused tears from earlier, but deep, wrenching sobs. The officer told me everything. I think they were right. Dad lied to me. She gasped. About everything in the world didn't end. You weren't dead all those years. She looked up at Elaine with devastated eyes. Why did he do that to me? Elaine held her tighter. I don't know, baby. Sometimes people we trust do terrible things. It wasn't your fault. None of it was your fault. But I loved him, Izzy whispered, even when I thought I was helping save the world. I feel so stupid. You're not stupid. You were a child who believed what you were told by someone who should have protected you. Elaine stroked her daughter's hair. We'll get through this together. It won't be easy, but we're both strong, stronger than we know. They sat in the waiting room. As the station quieted around them, somewhere Charles and his associates were being processed into a system that would hopefully keep them away forever. But for Elaine and Izzy, the focus had shifted from the past to the future. We'll need a new home. Elaine said softly, somewhere fresh, and you'll go to school, make friends, have a real life. Izzy nodded against her shoulder. Will the people hate me? Is it going to be painful moving on? No, Elaine said gently. Time helps. Talking helps. Love helps. The pain will ease, and you'll create new memories to soften the old ones. And as for people, not everyone needs to know what happened. You get to choose who's worthy of your trust, who you share your story. When an officer appeared in the doorway, ma'am, the escort to the hospital is ready. They stood together, hands clasped, as they walked to the police station. Elaine thought about the long journey ahead, medical examinations, therapy sessions, legal proceedings, learning to trust again, to live without fear, teaching Izzy about the world she'd been denied, but they would. Face it together, love real, love protective and nurturing, would light their way. The darkness Charles had created couldn't extinguish that in the end. That was a lesson. Evil might hide behind familiar faces in ordinary houses where in a mass of love, but true love endures. It searches through 9 years of darkness. It breaks down false walls. It refuses to give up hope. As they reached the station doors, Izzy squeezed Elaine's hand. I'm scared, Mom. Me too, Elaine admitted, but we're together now, and together we can face anything. They stepped into the night, toward the waiting car, toward healing, toward a future they would build one day at a time.